Hello and welcome to your first flipped lesson regarding learning styles. This is something we're going to touch on within your first lesson. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about this with regards to your sports coaching. So first of all, why are they important? Now there might be a few references to teachers, but this goes synonymous or hand in hand with coaches. So coaches who understand what learning style their participants are will be able to put on sessions that meet the needs of those different learning styles. And also, if you can teach your participants or your students to know what their learning style are, then it can actually help them when they're learning perhaps new skills within your sports session. However, this is not always the case, and we're going to look at some specific examples a little bit later on, but it's great that there are learning styles, but there are some people out there who think that there is not much point to them, and that's something that we're going to look at. So, what are learning styles? Now this thing is VAC, and this stands for Visual, Oral and Kinesthetic. Kinesthetic is just a posh word for physical. So visual learners, they like to see diagrams, pictures. That's how best they learn. Oral learners are people who listen and gain their information through that way. Who like to be told certain things, teaching points, and that's how they learn. Or physical, so people who are actually using active learning, who learn through doing. In my experience, all my sports students usually gravitate towards this learning style, whether it's be because of their sport backgrounds or maybe just because this is the predominant learning method for most human beings. And there's a study, multimodal, so you use different modes, pretty much if you use visual, oral and physical. These guys here, Nuzhat et al. So Nuzhat is the name of the researcher, and et al. Just means he had a few other people working with him. They found that people who learned using visual, oral and physical got better grades than people who were just a single learning style. Pretty much common sense. If you can pick up visual, listening and learn by doing, you're going to perform better than people who are just stuck to one mode. So this guy here, Kolb, he is classified as the guru of learning styles. He pretty much came up with them. And this is based on his cycle of learning, where people, now they can start at different sections of this cycle, and we'll look at this when we get onto learning theory, which will be next week. However, all he said was that when people want to learn something, they'll come up with an idea about how to do something. They will do it, and then reflect on it to see how it went, and then come up with a new plan. So they've had that experience, and then they reflect on it, and then they make a new abstract concept about how to do it, and then they test it by doing it. Okay, so example may be someone wants to learn how to do keep-ups. They have an idea in their head about they've got to keep their maybe a floppy ankle. They then do the keep-ups. They see that the ball goes out of control, and then they think, well, maybe if I lock my ankle next time, it'll work, and then they try that way. Okay, so his learning styles, if we move on, are people who go into different sections of this cycle. So we have reflectors, so the people who after perhaps have seen something or doing something, they think about it, think about how they could actually improve it or come up with something different. The people who like just to make up a theory before they do it about how they might come into something completely new, come up with a new theory. Activists, those who like to do it, those who like to experience it and go through there. And then we have the pragmatists. So these are the people who like to get, who take on the results after doing something and then looking at the results of how they did it, how to then formulate a new plan to do something, and that's how their learning takes place. So remember to pause this or rewind if you didn't catch things, because I went through things quite quickly there. But if you just pause, rewind, go back to the bit that you don't understand, and we will focus on this in the lesson as well. Now this guy here, Willingham, he did a study which actually is quite good common sense, which we're going to have a look at this little diagram at the bottom. He said that he found that if a topic was visual, then teachers should teach in a visual style and not an oral style. So let's say you've got a load of learners who prefer oral learning styles, so listening, but they've still got to learn about the shapes of countries, then you've actually then got to put in a visual style. Even if they're oral learners, if they've got to learn the shape, they've actually got to see a diagram. Now we're going to put this into a practical. As you can see, our little guy here he wants to kick that ball stanch. So we're going to just take this guy's word for it here. So much like our teaching example, if you're trying to teach one of your participants to hit stanch, then at the end of the day, they're going to have to go out and actually hit stanch. It's no good telling them about it. It's no good drawing a diagram. They're only going to get it if they practice, which is the most case with virtually all sport participants, is that actually going to have to get out and do it. At the end of the day, that's going to be the most important thing when it comes to their learning. Okay, so moving on. What to present. So if you find that you've got visual learners, now you've got to, it's no good asking perhaps a group of 8-year-olds what learning style they are. They won't know. So you're going to have to find out, perhaps by trying different methods of coaching or teaching. If you try writing things down, using diagrams, getting your participants to write things down, maybe on mini whiteboards, things like this, maybe using tactic boards in basketball, for example, about where you want to go on certain set plays, and then you're seeing how they respond to that. Or you could try auditory, that's where you're talking to them, get them to discuss things with each other, ask them perhaps to come up with different tactics, using small groups in order to overcome an opponent. You could even combine this with your visual, using diagrams as well. And then you've got our kinesthetic learners, which are probably going to be the most significant for sports coaching. Doing demonstrations, getting them to demonstrate it, getting them to practice, getting them to try and hit stanch with the ball. If you're putting things, writing things down for people, usually if you're in a sports hall with a whiteboard, you might underline and highlight. Give them scenarios, places where participants or students can actually be hands-on involved. And you'll find this, and probably most of yourselves are kinesthetic learners, will learn more by doing these kind of things. So what you need to do for a task is I want you to come up and think about what type of learning do you learn best, and I want you to bring an example of a session coaching episode that met your style. So when have you been coaching, or you've been coached by someone else, and then you thought that really met my style, I learnt a lot during that session because it met my style. And some extra resources here which will also be available on Moodle, so you don't have to remember these. You can just go onto Moodle, find the PowerPoint, and then click on these. And this one is probably the most exciting one. Do they actually mean anything anyway? It's great having a load of visual learners, but in a sports session they're going to have to learn kinesthetically in order to pick it up. You could talk till the cows come home about how good you are at free throws, but you're not going to be able to actually get good at it until you actually practice something. An example that relates to perhaps physical training as well. If you want to be a power lifter, you're going to have to go out there and press some iron at the end of the day. Alright, thank you for listening. I look forward to discussing this with you in class.